Good morning, everybody. I see the way you sing that song, and that's passion. I see the way they sing this song, and that's passion. And our new series that we're in, it's called Becoming a Change Maker. And we can't make a difference in this world until a difference has been made in us first. And one of the ways that we're gonna make the biggest impact in this world is by what we're most passionate about. It's by our passion. And I spent this last week really wrestling and struggling with the idea of passion. And I asked myself, why is it that some people decide to live such passionate lives? They go on to make a big difference in this world, living for a purpose that's way greater than themselves. And some people choose to be passionate about things that really don't matter. Or they just kind of float through life very apathetically, just not really caring about anything. And I'm thinking about the word passion, and the word passion in the dictionary means a strong and barely controllable emotion. And I like that, but I think there's something more there. And I was on my Instagram this week, and I asked everybody what they thought passion meant to them. And I received two definitions that I liked a lot, and I wanted to share them with you guys. One person said passion is a step above love. To be in a passionate state means you give your life for that which you love. I really like that definition. The next one is, passion is when you put more energy into something than is required. It's more than just enthusiasm or excitement. Passion is ambition that is materialized into action. To put as much heart, mind, body, and soul into something as is possible. And I like that a lot too. And I was thinking about my life personally this week. And I've been told that I'm a pretty passionate guy, and I do get pretty fired up, especially about the things of God and His Word. And I started asking myself, why? Why? And I've asked myself this question fairly often, and I never had this definitive answer, and I feel like this week I had some revelation, and God was speaking to me. And I found this interview, and it was this very successful businessman. And the person asked him, they said, what made you so passionate that led to your success? And I want to read you his response because I really related to it a lot. And he said, one thing is, I think in many ways, I'm trying to save my own family from financial demise. When I was 7 years old, I remember walking around my house in Hawaii and seeing my mother crying. She was crying because we didn't have any money to pay the bills. And I asked her, Mom, what's wrong? She said, we just don't have any money, son. And I remember getting really angry at my dad, and I said, how can you let Mom cry like this? Well, he was at school, he was going for his master's degree. And I still remember thinking, well, if you're so smart, why are we so broke? And ever since then, I've given a lot of thought to the subject of passion. Passion to me isn't just love. It's anger and love combined. It's one that is fire and one that is something softer. I'd get so angry when I would see people struggling financially. And I would get so angry when I would see the school system putting all of these young people into such massive debt. And then there's the love that I had for them and my family. And I started to think about this. And I started to remember back when I was 7 years old and the things that I saw growing up. And all of us have things that we've seen and experienced in our lives. And I remember living with my mom, and I saw so many different people coming in and out of our household, different men. And then I remember my brother and I started living with our uncle. And I remember looking out of the window of the car, and I remember it feels like the scene of a movie. I remember seeing my mom walking the streets homeless. And I remember being so angry, not at her, but for her, thinking there's more to life. She doesn't have to live this way. And then I got into high school, and I saw what my mom's addictions and her habits did to her and what they stole from her. And she ended up having a stroke and becoming paralyzed. And I remember being at her hospital bed, being so angry, thinking this didn't have to happen. And I was angry. And then I got into high school and we played football, and our teammates would go to parties and they would drink and do stuff. And I'm not saying, you guys, that I'm perfect. I'm not. By any means, I'm not. But I was never one to follow that crowd. And it's because I knew I was angry for those people because I knew there was so much more to life. And I didn't know what to do with this anger until I started following Christ. When I started following Christ, this love came into my life. And my anger collided with this love, and then this passion started to ignite. So this passion really comes from following the person of Jesus Christ. And it wasn't until I started following my purpose that my passion found me. And that's one thing that we tell young people so often, hey, follow your passion. And that's good, but sometimes we can get our passion confused with our preference. Our feelings get in the way. And if you find your purpose in the person of Jesus Christ, I don't care where you're at. I don't care what job you're working. I don't care what you're doing. The passion will follow you. And you're gonna be able to make a difference right there wherever you're at. And so I started following Jesus, and I started being able to make a real difference, not only in my own life, but in the lives of others. And I was reading the scriptures and prepping for this message, and it brought me to the Gospel of Mark. And we're gonna be in Mark chapter 5, if you guys wanna turn there, Mark chapter 5. And I'm just gonna give us some context. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus encounters the disciples, and the disciples are passionate about a lot of things. They're passionate about nets, about boats, and about catching fish. So when you encounter Jesus, he takes you from what you could do, what you were trained to do your entire life, right? It was a family business. And actually, the Sea of Galilee to this day is still one of the local resources for their fish. It was a good business to be in. So Jesus takes us from what we could do, right? Catching fish. And he shows us what we should do. He shows the disciples that they should be fishers of men, not just fishermen. So when Jesus comes into our life, he takes us from what we could do, things that we've been trained to do, and he shows us what we should do, sometimes with those same passions. So the disciples begin to follow Jesus, and they're in the town of Capernaum, just to set the stage. So this was Jesus' home away from home. He spent time in Nazareth, and then Capernaum was just over the hill, and it sat along the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee is actually a lake, for those of you who didn't know. I thought it was this massive ocean growing up. It's a beautiful lake. And the disciples are following Jesus, and what's going on is as they're following their purpose, the person of Jesus Christ, their passions are starting to change. They're starting to see Jesus reach out to the lepers, the people that nobody wanted anything to do with, and heal them and make them whole. A paralyzed person was dropped through the roof of a house, and Jesus healed this person in front of everybody. So the disciples are following Christ. They're seeing the heart of God in the person of Jesus Christ. And that's changing their passion. It's rearranging their passion in their own heart. So not only when you follow your purpose, your passions start to get woken up, but some things start to change. You start to become passionate about different things, maybe things that you weren't passionate about before. So then we enter into Mark chapter 5. And just before this, Jesus is in Capernaum, and he's teaching along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And in Mark chapter 4, verse 1, it says that Jesus began to teach by the lake, and the crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into the boat, and he started teaching from the boat. And just to give some context, this is the home side. This is like the hometown. Jesus is in Capernaum. So he's doing all these miracles in his hometown. And then at verse 35 in chapter 4, it says, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go to the other side. And Jesus was actually saying something very, very kind of crazy right here. When he said, let's go to the other side, it wasn't just a geographical term. It wasn't saying, hey, let's just go over there. What Jesus was saying was, the Capernaum sat at the northern side of the lake. On the eastern side and all around the southern side of the lake was what's called the Decapolis. And the word decade, comes from this word Decapolis. It's Greek, and it means 10. So there were 10 cities that sat on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And what happened in the Decapolis was the Gentiles or the pagan people lived there, according to the Jews. So the Decapolis was an extension of the Canaanites. These were the people that God drove out of the promised land. And this wasn't just for no reason at all, right? God wasn't just like, hey, let's just get these guys out of here. He had them driven out of the promised land because they were very wicked. So over in the Decapolis, they worship pigs. They offer children up as sacrifice. They commit acts of sexual perversion at their temples for worship. The Jews, the disciples, would have known very clearly where Jesus was asking them to go, to the other side of the tracks, the place where those other people are at. And so they travel to the other side. And let alone to make things worse, a legion of Roman soldiers would camp out on the other side. Rome was the empire that was trying to extend its dominance to the whole entire world. So what Rome did was they oppressed the Jewish people. And the Romans occupied the cities of the Decapolis. And I've actually been there and I've seen one of the cities. And so Rome would set up their temples everywhere and they would bring their practices of worship. So the Jews would not have wanted to go to the other side. And in Mark chapter 5, this is where the story picks up in verse 1. It says they went across the lake to the other side. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. Not one person was strong enough to subdue this man. Night and day among the tombs and the hills, he would cry out, and he would cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." Not only were they on the other side, the side that no Jew would have ever wanted to be caught on, but they approach a demon-possessed man, a person that the people on the other side didn't want anything to do with. They all had rejected this man. And to make matters worse, a Jew could never go anywhere near a dead body. They would be ceremonially unclean. This man is hanging out around dead corpses in tombs, and Jesus still approaches this man. Jesus is taking the disciples to the places that they would have never have wanted to go to show them what God is most passionate about. And that's the other side. That's the other side. And you know what I love too about Scripture is it doesn't tell us what happened to this man in order for him to end up this way. And I believe that the Bible does that on purpose. If we knew what it was that this man did in order to end up this way, you know what we would do? We would focus on those actions. We would focus on the way that he ended up that way. And we would forget that we all really have the potential to end up in this place. And I don't know what happened. It could have been an unhealthy relationship. Broke his heart, sent him in a downward spiral, right? It could have been him heading up to the temples to partake in practices of worship, entering into child sacrifices and sexual perversion. And it just sent him in a downward spiral. He could have been living for the approval of other people, trying to please other people instead of seeking to please the one true God, and that made him depressed, always longing for something more. He felt empty inside. It could have been drugs or alcohol. It could have been anything that opened this man up to demonic possession. And it's a reminder that we all have the potential to end up in this place. So Jesus confronts this man, and he asks the demons to name themselves. And they say, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And they say, "Jesus, please, don't send us out of this area." This must have been, obviously, a dark, evil area, and the demons didn't want to leave this area. So Jesus gave the demons permission to leave into a herd of pigs, 2,000 to be exact. And the pigs rush over the edge of the cliff and nosedive into the lake, and they all die. And it picks up in verse 14, and it says, "Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind." This dude was naked when Jesus approached him. I would have never confronted this guy. Let's just be honest. This just goes to show that Jesus, there's no place he's willing to not go in order to save us. Not only was he approaching the tombs, but this man was naked, howling at the moon, hey, somebody else has to come minister to this guy. That's crazy. So he's dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. The people were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and also to the pigs. And then verse 17, then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. "Jesus, please go, get out of here. Please head back to the other side." And I started to ask myself, why? Why did they want Jesus to leave? And they loved bacon, 2,000 pigs rushing over the edge of a cliff. I get my bacon from Costco, and they have the center cut pieces, you guys. Applewood smoked. It's amazing. Seriously, go try it. And if you're bored, go to Costco on a day that you're hungry, and you just hit all the sample spots. I'm passionate about Costco. I go there once a week, and I get my fill, and then I head out. Sometimes I don't even buy anything. Well, me and Josh call it Costco therapy. That's what we do. We love it. But where was I at? So they could have been upset that their way of making a living just ran over the edge of a cliff, right? Or they could have been afraid of the power that they saw Jesus had to take this man who was so far gone and to heal him. But you know what else? They know what people from the other side are like. And they could have been like, we know that you really don't have any reason for being over here. We know that if you ever come over here, it's just to judge us and ridicule us. Head back to the other side, man. We know you don't really want to make a difference over here. So Jesus says, okay. And he gets back into the boat and he gets ready to head back to the home side. And look what happens in verse 18. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, but Jesus wouldn't let him. And I can see this scene playing out. I can see the boats weren't big and Jesus is in the boat and they're pushing off from the shore. And the demon-possessed man is running into the water ankle deep and he's saying, Jesus, take me with you, please. Don't leave me here. This place has taken so much of my life. It's destroyed everything that I love. Please just take me to the other side with you. Please. And that's the mark of a true conversion, you guys. He's not using Jesus as a loophole. It's not a get out of hell free card. He doesn't want anything from Jesus. He just wants to be with Jesus. That's it. Yeah, I mean, amen. He just wants to be with Jesus. And you know what Jesus says? No. He says, stay there. He says, you know what you're gonna do? You're gonna go back into the Decapolis. You're gonna go back into the darkness. And you're gonna tell everyone what the Lord has done for you, that he has had mercy upon you. And you know what the demon-possessed man probably said? He probably had tears in his eyes and he probably said, you know what? You're right. And he had this inner resolve and this newfound passion from the purpose he has in Christ to go back and to tell everybody on the other side what this man, Jesus, has just done for him. So he goes back to the other side. Jesus and the disciples go back to the home side. And it's crazy what one man can do. And I ask myself the question, are we allowing Jesus to take us to the other side? Are we? And where is the other side for you? I mean, when we think globally, right, we can say ISIS is like the other side, persecuting Christians, despise them and their beliefs and for what they're doing. And we think about our country, the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm not gonna get political, I'm not going there, but I'm just saying, sometimes the other party can be viewed as the other side, right? And even in our cities, sometimes there's some dark places in our cities. Sometimes this is what Jesus calls us to do. We see it in the scriptures. He does not call us to separate ourselves and isolate from the other side. He doesn't. He doesn't call us to go to the other side and to indulge in their practices either. So I always ask myself the question, if you're gonna go out and go places, why are you going there? He calls us to go to the other side and to permeate the heart of Jesus, to go into the darkness and to show people a light. That's what he calls us to do. And it blows my mind what passion can do. Passion can change not only your household, passion can change your city. And even let's bring it home. Sometimes our house is divided. Sometimes we feel like our family members are on the other side, right? Like women, sometimes you're like, the man on the other side of the bed, like that pig worshiping, never taking out the trash husband of mine, like that man's on the other side. And even I started having this real deep introspection. Sometimes the other side is a certain part of my heart that I'm not willing to give over to Jesus, because I think that when I pursue my own happiness, I'm gonna find more joy there. Sometimes the other side is inside of us. Sometimes we need to give our whole heart to Christ so that we can go out and make a difference. He goes back home to Capernaum. 2 months have gone by. 2 months have gone by. And now Jesus is gonna head back to the other side. And just to remind us, his welcoming party was one naked, demon-possessed man when he went to the other side for the first time. So now he's going back to the other side, and what is his welcoming party now? In Mark chapter 7, verse 37, when Jesus got back to the other side, it says the people were overwhelmed with amazement. He's done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. This is another gospel account of the same situation in Matthew chapter 14, verse 34 to 36. When they had crossed over to the other side, they landed there, and when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. One man with enough passion can make this big of a difference. One man was his welcoming party when he went to the other side. And this man is on fire. He found his purpose in Jesus Christ, and now he's telling everybody. He's telling his story. That's all he's doing is he's telling his story. And then in Mark chapter 8, he's on the other side. 4,000 people come to hear the teaching of Jesus Christ. Israel was not that big, you guys. We had 4,000 people at all of our Christmas Eve services. This is a lot of people in this time. One man with enough passion can make this big of a difference. And so even for us in our own households, don't think that you can't make a difference. You can. If God can use a naked, demon-possessed man who lost everything, surely he can use you. He can use you to change a city if you have enough passion. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, man, the disciples must have gotten it, right? They must have been the people that were sold out and on fire for the cause of Christ. But then just a couple chapters later, we see in Mark chapter 10, verse 32 to 34, if you'll just follow along with me, they were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside, and he told them what was going to happen. He said, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and to the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles. Jesus is saying they're going to hand me over to the same people that I went over to the other side for to save. The same people that I went over to the other side for to heal and to make whole are the kind of people that end up killing me. And you know what the disciples say? They say, Jesus, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What? And Jesus actually entertains these knuckleheads. He says, okay, what is it that you ask? And they say, when you enter into your glory, can we sit at your right and your left? Jesus is still rearranging the passion of the disciples. They still don't get it. Jesus says, you have no idea what you're asking. You have no idea what you're asking. What happened to the disciples to make them live such passionate lives? What was it? When we think we're healthy, we don't need the doctor. When we have all that we want, we're not concerned about what we need. And it wasn't enough for Jesus to tell these disciples that he had to go and die for them. Not only for them, but for everyone. Jesus had to show the disciples that they were the people that were on the other side. What happened in the disciples' lives? It was the cross. That's what happened. It was them seeing their best friend, their Lord and their Savior, going to the cross to die for their sins. And they saw that Jesus was not only willing to cross a lake for them, not only willing to cross the oceans for us, he was willing to leave heaven and come down to earth and show us that passion always has a price. Always. And this is what I mean, especially young people. You're going to live your lives for a lot of different things. And passion takes sacrifice. The things that you're most passionate about in this life, you're gonna end up sacrificing for your entire life. Your time, your treasure, your talents. You're gonna give all of these things to what you're most passionate about. And Jesus wants to take all of us to the places that we never would have wanted to go to show us what he's most passionate about. Where is your other side? Sometimes it can be the other side of our heart. I heard this story by a man named John Piper. And John said when he was a young boy, his father was a pastor. And every Sunday they would have church. And they would see this 80-year-old man come in the back, and he was an atheist, and he didn't believe in God. And he would just sit in the back, 80 years old. And he said one day he sees this 80-year-old man walk to the front of the pews. And John sees his dad, who's the pastor, sit down with this 80-year-old man at the front of the pews. And John's dad, who was the pastor, put his hand on his shoulder. And John said, I was close enough to hear these words that forever changed my life. This 80-year-old man had just accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. And he's bawling, he's crying. And he says, I've wasted it. I've wasted it. I look back on the 80 years of my life and I see that I've wasted it living it for things that don't matter. And I think about my mom's life too, and I'm like, man, she looks back and she could say the same thing. I wasted it. And I don't want us to waste it. Passion always has a price. After you see the price that Jesus Christ paid for you on the cross, oh man, there's a fire that starts to burn deep down inside of you that nobody can put out. And I don't want us to waste it. Some of us will look back on 2016 and be like, man, I wasted that one. I don't want you to waste 2017. I want you guys to become passionate about what matters most. We're all gonna end up paying a price either way. And just be reminded, if somebody crossed a lake, crossed oceans, crossed the world, left heaven and came down to earth for you, that must mean they're probably pretty obsessed with who you are and they want to love on you. And that's exactly what God has done. He's left his throne. He came down to earth for us. We see that Jesus was most passionate about us. We were the reason that he went to the cross. He was literally dying to be with us. And it doesn't matter how far you go, how bad you fail, his love will never stop chasing after you. It's relentless. It'll continue to pursue you. And we're gonna sing a new song. And if you guys would, please stand with me. His love will never stop chasing after you.